Hey everyone, welcome to my webcast. Glad you could be here today. Well, briefly, I'm going to talk for a few minutes about what I call my pyramid of social inertia. And what that means, that's kind of my barometer of how a community measures their response to homelessness and their attitude and etc. Very simple idea. When we go through this, you can think about uh, where your community is and what your community is doing about homelessness and their attitude towards it. Anyway, a little bit about me. Thanks for tuning into my channel, Dan McDonald from Homeless Innovations in Newport Richey, Florida. My day job, I work full time as a police officer, and then in my spare time, I go and fix homelessness around the country and et cetera, et cetera. So if you're not quite sure what to do in your community, give me a call or email and info at homelesspolice.com or 800-643-1997. See if I can help you. Anyway, let's get going here and kind of discuss how I kind of measure a community response to homelessness. This is a concept I developed. I call this my, as you know, my period of social inertia. As you can see by the bottom, most communities will fall into the bottom. This is the kind of the base. This is the base of the pyramid where most communities are. That's pretend it doesn't exist. Just maintain the status quo. Do nothing. It's someone else's problem. And I'll go into kind of some community responses to this. Second one is for managing homelessness. I think probably most communities are in the middle there. That's where they will fit in. And at the top is sort of like a traffic light here. Green is the best. Yellow, proceed with caution. Red, you need to stop what you're doing and kind of rethink your game. Just want to take a sip of my coffee here. That's the biggest question in your community is what are your priorities? Where in this ladder or this pyramid do you fit in? And where do you want to be? It's increasingly, I think you should try to move to the top of the pyramid rather than be in the middle and the bottom, because ultimately its problem is not going to go away on its own. You can't ignore it. And we'll kind of go over some of my typical observations here from many responses. One, it's generally is not a police problem. That's what I do in my full-time job during the daytime. Police officer, my full-time job for the last 8 years is doing homeless outreach. So I don't make arrests. I don't take calls for service. My sole job is to help the homeless. So that's a common response. It's not a police problem. And that is sort of true. In an ideal world, would it be a police problem? Nah, I doubt it. But in an ideal world, there wouldn't be crime. We wouldn't need police officers. We wouldn't need social workers. Because there would be no homelessness or social problems. But the reality is, every community is going to have these issues. So we got to address the hand that we've dealt with it. This is typical. Probably one most common here. Let someone else deal with it. I work in the city. It's a county problem, or vice versa. I work for the county. It's a city problem. Some areas are going to kind of going to a regional approach. Seattle, they're doing that. Or we'll see how it works. They've got lots of other issues too. So it's not really, you don't really have one different organization kind of trying to do their own thing. So let someone else deal with it. It's not my problem. Very common reaction. In terms of managing homelessness, this is, I think, where most communities fall into, and this can also get them in trouble, particularly in the court of law. The criminalization of homelessness. I should point out that I'm a police officer full time. I'm not. If you kind of think, how long have I been asleep? What year is this? I get that quite a lot. And you kind of condoning homelessness. You're a police officer, and you kind of looking the other way. Kind of give everyone a free pass. That's not the case. We still have laws There's a difference between homeless that commit crimes and mostly nuisance crimes. For one of the barometers is life-sustaining activity like eating, sleeping, using sanitary facilities like toilets, to criminals who happen to be homeless. Um, if if you're homeless and trying to sleep somewhere to get a good night's sleep, that's one thing. But if you're out there, a bank robber who is homeless, well, that's apples and oranges. That's a whole different matter. Well, we have housing for serious criminals. That is called prison. So just my 2 cents worth. Something. If you lost your mind, your cop tell them, kind of advocating against the criminalization of homelessness. Well, we really need to address the solutions rather than symptoms. That's kind of the bottom line here. Another common response is the charity response to homelessness. Once again, don't get me wrong. I'm all for charity. I donate a few bucks every year to charity, but if your community, if this is your entire response to homelessness, then there is a problem. Um, I can understand people handing out food, handing out blankets, particularly even here it's about 84 degrees right now here in Tampa area, so it's fairly nice weather. But the lowest I've been at my house, 30 miles north of Tampa, is 19 degrees. So even in Florida, it does get hot or cold down here, and very hot in the summertime. So people need respite from the elements, particularly in the northern climates up north, or where you get blizzards and ice and snow, and freezing death is really a potential issue. We do have cold weather shelters here. So the barometer is, I guess, barometer, that would be barometric pressure, but the guideline is 40 degrees here in our community. We'll open the shelters, and we usually open them about half a dozen times a year if it gets really that cold. So in terms of charity, if you think handing out food, etc., that is filling a need, it's not solving a problem. It's apples and oranges. It's two completely different things. And other presentations, particularly on outreach, which is what I do, I can many of the folks that do charity work are good candidates for doing more outreach and actual problem solving. So there needs to be a balance. Just if your entire response is managing and maintaining homelessness, then you're not really solving a problem. You just kind of in that airport holding pattern, and some sooner or later you got to come in for a landing. Probably one of my this is probably one of the most expensive responses, and I could probably do a whole presentation on this, is the warehousing of the homeless. You will see these particularly in my next county over has one. The come as you are shelters, jail diversion shelters, etc. Our the local one that we have over in the next county, I did some kind of math about the success rate. Their budget, I think, is about a couple $1 million a year. They'll get a few thousand people in and out of there. Looking at the actual success rates, if you're homeless, you roughly have the same chance of landing on the moon or a lifetime chance of being struck by lightning. So those are odds that I don't want to take to any shelter. It's very expensive, and particularly the courts are finding that they don't work. If you're trying to warehouse, same thing with jails and prisons. Yeah, if you're on top of the FBI's most wanted list, then you should be locked up. But if all you're doing is committing life-sustaining activities, then why don't we look at solutions rather than expensive options, such as these come-as-you-are shelters. So that's my rant on that. And it's one of the problems with warehousing that the homeless is that it's very popular with elected officials. If you can just sweep the streets, keep everyone out of the urban core, make them go away, even if it's expensive and ineffective, well, we've uh, we've got them off the streets. But then again, we are still not solving the problem. So just keep that in mind too. That might come up at some point. Finally, moving up to the top of the pyramid is ending homelessness. We all know, or should know, that the only known cure for homelessness is housing. We Pretty much every community has a shortage of housing. That's often used as an excuse or a reason to kick the can to the road, or kind of go back to the previous response of going back into management mode. Well, we don't have enough housing, so why even bother? I had an elected official one time tell me, why put up a 100 beds of permanent supportive housing when we get way more shelter beds? And well, you're solving problems permanently, and but I think it was lost on that particular person. And if you are ending homelessness, then you're going to basically be in problem solving mode. You really need to address the problems, not the symptoms. So it can be anything from helping someone get an ID to helping them getting in a shelter. I mean, a housing focused shelter. There are good shelters, there are bad shelters, like anything else. So you can help solve someone's problem. We use progressive engagement and intervention. One gentleman, it took me 4.5 years to get him housed. Other folks want, particularly with ID, that's kind of my bread and butter. One gentleman, I got him an out-of-state birth certificate from Illinois. We're in Florida. I was able to get that in less than 24 hours, so he could get back to work. So I do have an entire 90-minute presentation on IDs, or how to get an ID and deal with the Real ID Act and birth certificates. You might kind of think might be kind of sleep-inducing 90 minutes listening to me talk about IDs, but I did that. Did the presentation at last October. The Florida Coalition to End Homelessness in Orlando, with standing room only. I've got training guides, so if you're interested in more information, feel free to contact me about that. Of course, we all know, or hopefully we should know, that housing first is the way to go. It's evidence-based, has nationally about an 85% success rate. We're not dealing with anything new here. Housing first was developed in New York City by Dr. Samson Barris. It's been around a long time. It's been proven. So once again, it's no mystery. We don't need to reinvent the wheel in every single community, which I see quite a bit. Of course, if you committed to them, you are bringing solutions to the table, and not just simply addressing symptoms, which doesn't really solve anything long term. And particularly for the police point of view, then the area of interest for law enforcement is reducing calls for service, lowers crime, it reduces emergency room visits, reduces jail visits. In my community, we have too many bed space. The community I live in, we actually there was a bond issue on the ballot last year to build more jail space. I didn't vote for it. Whereas the county I work to the south, we actually have too much jail space because of alternative sentencing and real jail diversion, whereas problem solving around jail diversion as just a cheaper form of incarceration, or therapeutic incarceration. So anyway, that's my short video on kind of where is your community and my period of social inertia, and give you some ideas about where you are, where do you want to be. And if you got any questions, feel free to give me a call. Put up my contact information here or email. This is my, there we go, my contact information. I should have put my phone number. My email's probably the best. Info at homelesspolice.com. Homeless Police on Twitter as well, and YouTube. And 800-643-1997 is my phone number. If you have any questions about homelessness or needs a few ideas, or I want to try and do some more YouTube videos and address different issues I run into, hopefully save you some aggravation that I have perhaps gone through myself, having spent about 16,000 hours over the last 8 years full time to figure out what works and what doesn't work. So anyway, so we appreciate you tuning in. Certainly feel free to forward this video and watch the replay, and hopefully you found it helpful. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.